Good morning, everybody, and I'm very, very happy to see you all here. And also, just to pick up the tone of the discussion so far, I don't think we would have been having quite this discussion 10 years ago. So it really does excite me as a professional environmentalist to start seeing that we're shifting the way we're having these debates and discussions. So again, I must apologize for the color changes. I promise that I used the branded colors. So our comms people out there, please, it wasn't my fault. Just in terms of my day job, okay, so a lot of people ask me what on earth environmental sustainability is. And technically my day job is to oversee biodiversity management, coastal management, climate change and sustainability for the province. But I'm currently not doing that job. I've been seconded to the Provincial Disaster Management Centre because this drought that we're experiencing at the moment is extremely serious. It's not just the city of Cape Town, it's across the province. And essentially that's what I want to talk to you about today, but then not just leave you with the severity of the problem, but also start talking about what we collectively can do towards looking at some of the solutions. So the photograph that you see there is actually Tewater's Cliff. That was just before winter, but unfortunately, as you all know, our winter rainfall was extremely poor. So the picture hasn't really changed that much. And at the moment, according to the dashboard for the Western Cape Water Supply System, we're sitting at approximately 35%, only 25% of which is usable, drinkable water. So this is a graph showing the rainfall that we've experienced over the last few decades. This starts at 1993. This was predicted by our climate change models that we would see an increase in our rainfall reduction over time, and we've been tracking exactly that. This is not just something that the Western Cape is experiencing. We're finding that in a number of areas across the world, particularly large tourist destinations as well, exactly the same kind of expectation is coming to fruition. So I don't know how many of you know that Rio de Janeiro, Rome, as well as a number of other cities in 2017 have all faced scenarios of severe drought. And I don't think California has been out of a drought for the last decade. So it is not something that we are struggling with alone, but it certainly is something that we are struggling with the intensity of this particular drought, much more than any of the experiences of droughts we've had before. Droughts are natural to our environment and our ecosystem. We have a rough 7 to 9 year cycle. The severity of this drought, however, is unrecorded. Historically, we've never had a drought this serious. In 2014, our dams were full. However, we're going into the 4th year of this drought, and from the agricultural sector, it's one of the most serious droughts that has ever hit them. And we have a number of our citizens who have already lost their jobs because of this. So just looking, just looking at the World Economic Forum for a moment, and I love putting up this slide because as a lifetime environmentalist, a lot of people will often tell me that the picture of the world I'm giving them is a greeny or hippie version of it. Well, not anymore. The economists agree with me now. So looking at the range, and even if you can't read the small writing, essentially what that shows you is 2007, 2012, and 2017. What the World Economic Forum thought would be the most likely risks to the global economy, and then the highest impact on the global economy. And you'll notice that by 2017, we have significantly more green blocks than we did before. So in terms of the World Economic Forum, extreme weather events, natural disasters are all something that we're going to have to get used to across the world. And we have to plan our resilience in order for that. Sorry, can I get a glass of water? I know we have a shortage, but maybe just a small amount. Thank you very much. So this is a picture from our climate scientists at the University of Cape Town, who are world-renowned scientists and who have been modeling this for at least the last 2 decades. Essentially what we see, and you can see that the slightly pink line, the purple line, and then the almost red line at the bottom are the rainfall patterns that we've seen over the last 3 years. Each one has been significantly lower than the one before. And that is in fact what is making this statistically one of the worst droughts ever. Certainly one of the worst droughts in the last millennium from a statistical perspective. And that's actually what has caught us a little short in terms of planning. No one planned for this level of drought. Drought, yes. Having enough water to tide from one year to the next, absolutely. But 4 years in a row of not just below average rainfall, but significantly below average rainfall is really where we are sitting at the moment. That's just for the Cape Town rainfall. I know a number of you might work on events. Sorry, I'm really struggling today. I know a lot of you might work on events outside of Cape Town, and I want to show you that unfortunately that pattern is one that's repeating itself across the Western Cape. So again, even though you can't see the detail on the labels there, you will notice that practically every one of the lines is below the next one. And the red line at the bottom is this last year's winter rainfall cycle. So this is exactly one of the most severe droughts that we're likely to look at. It's a 1 in 1,000 year drought. And unfortunately, it doesn't mean that the next drought won't also be a 1 in 1,000 year drought. That's not how statistics work. Each time we have this sort of risk of having this intense drought. And this is why a lot of people are starting to call this the new normal. And what it effectively means is that both for our businesses as well as for our citizens, and certainly for the kinds of events and tourism that we have, we need to be able to adapt and make sure that our systems are that much more resilient to be able to deal with even this kind of crisis. So that's a map of where we are at the moment in terms of the surface water supply. I know that our engineers are currently working with all 30 municipalities to try and understand the groundwater options as well as reuse and desalination to add it to the map. But at the moment what that map shows is areas where the surface water availability and the demand are completely mismatched. And you'll notice that there are 4 municipalities that are deemed to be in a critical state. It doesn't mean that the yellow ones and the green ones are not needing urgent intervention. It simply means that those are the ones that we have to have very specific responses for in the immediate future. And hence, the reason why the City of Cape Town is strengthening its further engagements with us about the limitations on water and taking us to a level 6 restriction, which before 2017 never existed. We never got beyond level 4 previously. This is not just a Western Cape problem though. We know that Gauteng came awfully close to running dry a short while back, but essentially what we're looking at, and this information is from the Agricultural Research Council, is that we are not the only ones who are going to be dry in the next 12 months. So what we're learning here and the kind of market expansion that is happening for our water sector and for responding appropriately to this challenge is something which is going to be countrywide and possibly even sub-Saharan African-wide in terms of looking forward. So in some ways you could look at this as an amazing market opportunity. The market space for dealing with sustainable responses to water crises is exploding. This is very much a space to get into. So just looking at what those economic impacts of this actually are and what certainly from economic development and tourism, the teams are working on very hard is to try and highlight the knock-on effects. So for a lot of people sitting in their homes, they think that day zero is what they need to be concerned about. And for those of you who are visitors to our region, day zero is essentially how it's being referred to for the day where our system is unable to present clean drinking water to our residential taps. So the city is now talking about that being May, unless we can reduce our consumption significantly further, or if we get huge amounts of rain, which is not predicted at the moment. But essentially, we're already seeing the economic impact of this drought. Very much agriculture is, I believe somebody referred to it yesterday as the canary of the economy. Agriculture picks up those impacts first. And we've shared, I think, approximately 21,000 jobs in the agricultural sector over the last quarter. That means that there are 21,000 families who have no income and need to be supported at this point. So we know that for a lot of companies, whether they're industrial companies, whether they're hotels who are having tour operators contact them and say, should we keep South Africa on the itinerary for next year? We're needing to appeal to all sectors to actually look at their own plans. What is their business continuity plan? For many of these companies that we're talking to, water was not one of those considerations until recently. They mostly have energy plans. They have very good energy plans because of the energy crisis we had a few years back. But drinking water and sanitation water wasn't something that they'd done a lot of work on. Let me tell you, they're working hard right now. Because whether you have uncertain supply, so you're not sure when it's going to go off, or if there's a pipe burst, variable water quality, certainly for a lot of our manufacturing plants, it's a tremendous problem. But then also the increase in water tariffs. And as the discussion is now, whether or not there's a drought levy that is going to come through as well. All of those obviously shift the price points of what it is that we're working on as a business. So what does this do to us? Essentially, it introduces that change management. So how do we start responding to this new normal? What language do we use? We don't want to frighten people off, but at the same time, we need to communicate that seriousness. There's a potential for reduced productivity. Even today's event got moved because of the heat, and we're expecting increased heat over the next few years based on our climate change models. Delaying investment that was on the cards, perhaps, or having to invest in unfunded or previously undetermined infrastructure investments to make sure that you do have your water plans in place. Increased cost of inputs, we've already spoken about, and the potential for decreased competitiveness, especially for those who are in other regions who don't have those increased costs, which may lead to a direct profit loss. One of the things we're extremely concerned about then is employer retrenchment and downsizing of companies, because we know that that leads to enormous socioeconomic hardship and stress. Importing of products that we previously sourced locally, which may mean an undermining of those local industries that then perhaps can't get back on their feet again. The reputational loss if they're unable to actually deliver on a service that has been promised. And then, of course, reputational loss as a tourism destination. But I do just want to flag this one because it isn't just us. I mentioned a couple of international towns earlier who are experiencing almost exactly the same. And I'm hoping that we don't land up with somehow being the losing edge of that particular wedge. So not being a preferred tourism destination when Rome, Rio, etc. still remain preferred destinations. However, they're in the same sort of positioning we are. So you can see from the knock-on effect of all of this, there is a range of responses that we need to put in place as government, both to try and assist companies to weather the drought so that we don't see that enormous increase in unemployment, pricing, particularly food security as well, with our agricultural sector being hit as hard as it is. Some of the smaller businesses or businesses that are in water-dependent industries closing down. I think it's been a hell of a hard year for the pool industry, that's for sure. Decrease in rates and taxes coming in because you're having to spend on other infrastructure, a possible decline in GVA, and then of course a loss of confidence, which we're trying to avoid. So looking specifically at your sector, and this is something that you'll often listen to on the radio or in discussions with locals, people will point to our tourists and say they're the problem. Well, I haven't included it in my slide deck, but in fact, domestic use, built houses, formal houses, are using between 60 and 70% of the water. Not informal settlements, not industry, and not our tourism sector. Domestic users. My house, your house, if you live in Cape Town, we're the ones who need to cut significantly. Yes, our tourists can produce spikes, especially in our smaller towns. We know that areas like Plett and areas along the South Cape struggle with those peak demands. But that's really where we need to make sure that they're prepared for those, and they perhaps have other augmentation solutions like reuse or desalination to prop up their peak periods. Based on a study that was done in terms of generally what do tourists use in developing countries, the finding was that tourists can use up to 3 to 8 times the amount of water that the local residents do. I think some of our middle and upper class water users, probably that fact is not the case. And I think that's something that we really need to engage with as well. You will hear just now from some of the operators and some of the event hosts what they're doing about engaging with these figures, but certainly starting with working this into your whole event plan and your communications becomes vitally important. So make it part of the ethos. Don't just leave it as an add-on, oh, by the way, we're in a drought. And we've also been trying to get people to go through all of the options. A lot of people are simply looking for the end, where they look for additional water supply, sometimes at an extremely high cost. We're saying to people exactly what you've heard from the Volvo Ocean Race people as well. Start with where you are. Do you understand what you use? Do you even measure it? Many companies and events have never actually even baselined what they use per person for a particular kind of event. We've never had to think that way. We do now. So it really is about trying to understand where your risks are, and then looking to water efficiency. What can you do? What can you require of the venue that you're using? On-site reuse, certainly for things like toilet flushing. Toilets, in fact, use approximately 69% of that domestic use. So it's a big area that you can do something about. And then you start looking at alternative water supply. Once you've done all the other things. The other things are much cheaper than starting to do boreholes and all sorts of other big systems. So just some thoughts from my side. Not being a professional events coordinator, I was sitting back thinking, well, what makes sense? What's logical? Obviously, measuring what you use and engaging with your venues about how much you use and actually trying to track that is a good starting point. Don't compromise on health. We know that very particular kinds of water need to have very good qualities, and essentially the rule of thumb is the closer it is to your mouth, the better the quality needs to be. So yes, absolutely, you could use non-potable water for certain kinds of things, but you really want to be careful and want to make sure that whatever you're providing to people attending your event is the right level for the right sort of task. Demand changes, behavior is a big one. In terms of whether it's asking people not to flush the loo, or whether it's doing something like asking them to bring their own bottles so that they can be filled on site. All of these things can be quite small, but have significant impacts in terms of your event. Waterless products, so whether it be waterless hand sanitizers that are available, and a little notice asking people to use those rather than spending lots of time washing their hands. We do want people washing their hands, doesn't have to be with water. Control on site, how much control do you have? Is it something where you are trucking in water or providing water coolers or something like that so that you can actually get a fairly easy measurement sense of how much you use? Or you simply link to the municipal supply? And have you actually asked the question of your venues about whether or not they are metering what your location and perhaps the ablution facilities with it is using for your event? Save by design. Ask those hard questions. The more we put pressure on venue owners and landlords, the more they're going to start responding. And what we want is that systemic response. Not just for the drought. This is not just about putting an extra vat of water up. This is about making the change so that we never get to this point again. Team up with your accommodation venues as well as your hosting venues. We know that FEDASA is championing the reduction of water, certainly in their hotels. But there's a lot of facilities, small beds and breakfasts, who are very concerned that if they give the water saving message to those who are staying with them, that they will somehow be thought less of. This is way past that. And we need to make sure that if you are having a large event and you do know that there's preferred accommodation, that there is in fact perhaps event related messaging that they can have up in their facilities as well. So this links to awareness, signage, notices, announcements, practical hints specific to your event, all works fantastically. And I was really excited to see those fill your own bottles here, examples from Volvo. Sanitation needs. It's something which if you're doing an event where you're temporarily setting up an occasion or hosting an event, you can use some quite nice facilities that are completely waterless. Gone are the days when your temporary or higher end facilities are just the little blue boxes that smell awful. You can get really fancy ones now. So even if you are doing one of those upper crust events, you can actually get ones that look, feel, and are very usable to replace the water options. Educate yourself in terms of wherever you're going to be hosting an event. Go talk to the local municipality, and not just the people in the social, in the events or economic development side of things, but ask them to bring along the people who are dealing with water in their area as well, so that you can understand what challenges there might be. And then make sure that they're ready for those peak demands, so in your engagements with them. There are a number of areas where you could invite participants to donate into the drought efforts that are happening. As I said to you, there are a number of people who are already taking significant hardship from this drought in the agricultural areas. And what we've done is, it's not just that, it's a combination of what's happening at the moment. So we've also got avian flu, which has knocked out a number of our chicken and broiler producers. So we've reached out to the Red Cross and the Gift to the Givers, because we find it a lot easier, both from the giver side as well as from the recipient side, to work through established NGOs. And both of them have agreements with us to be able to guide that donation, whether it's an in-kind donation or a financial donation, to the people who need it most, who are being dealt with by our social development department. This is a picture of our Beaufort West Dam on the 8th of November. And I don't know how many of you saw the notice that just a couple of days after that, there was snow in Beaufort West in November. Okay, I don't know if any of you have ever experienced that in your lifetime before. I certainly haven't noticed it before. We are experiencing all sorts of changes. Some things that we absolutely can't predict. And unfortunately, the snow didn't make much difference to that surface water dam. Beaufort West is currently working off groundwater only, and their recycling plant. But this is essentially the kind of situation that we're dealing with. It is dire, but there is lots we can do. So let's be part of the solution and bring that whole of society response to how we deal with this drought. Thank you.
All right. Any quick questions while I've got Karen still standing? Anybody want to know anything very quickly? We pick it up with her a little bit later. I think we've got a hand on the other side. Is this the only one? Just over there.
Hi, it's Justin again from the Newsomberg Festival. Something we picked up during our festival, we had many talks on water. Something that struck me was that boreholes are not a solution. In fact, they're contributing significantly to a crisis. Would you mind commenting on that, and why there isn't a moratorium on the more wealthy folk putting in another borehole?
Yes, well, thank you for that. A lot of people have been responding by putting down boreholes and unfortunately using that water to keep their lawns green or other non-essential water uses. Essentially, our water system functions very much like a water cycle that all of us in the primary school. It's all linked. It's not as if they're completely separate engagements with water. So water that is in rivers seeps into the ground as well. So if you've got boreholes or well points very close to a river, it's essentially sucking river water through the soil to take it out in application. We're also quite fortunate in some ways that we have a number of aquifers. The primary aquifer, certainly under the Pacific Cape Town, is the Cape Flats aquifer. It desperately needs treatment when we draw it out because it is fairly polluted, but that services across the whole of the Cape Flats. That is water that is being stored naturally by Mother Nature, and it is water that we could draw out and use as drinking water with suitable treatment should we need it in the future. However, as you rightly say, at the moment the city only asks people to register their boreholes and their usage. It doesn't actually control them, and that's unfortunately a legal issue that the National Department of Water Affairs and Sanitation is responsible for groundwater. So the city and the province don't have any legal rights over the control of that water. It's actually something that's becoming a very avid discussion, and it's probably something that's going to be challenged formally because, for exactly this purpose, the common water and the good that we could get out of those aquifers is something which at the moment is being taken up by people who can afford to access. So it isn't a panacea, it isn't a solution for everyone. And another thing that I would ask a little while
you're going to start seeing your big trees in your garden dying off as well. So yes, we all that water is shared between neighbours as well. So if you've got one neighbour coming out to fill their pool, the next neighbour can't get any access to water. So it's something they're going to have to learn to deal with a lot better in terms of how we engage civically with each other and with our neighbours, because actually it's a shared resource. It's not simply because you put a door hole down that you can come out as much as you want.
Right, very good question, and we appreciate the answer. Any further takers? Any interests of applying perhaps? Maybe we should move on. Thanks very much. That's Conrad Shippey from Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. To bring it back to the Volvo Ocean Race itself, there's a water plan for the village, and we've already seen in some of the presentations, we've already seen some of what it is to be discussed or to be action in the course of the event. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to call forward Janneke Brasseke from World Sports South Africa, just to run us through what that plan is. So for the next few minutes, spotlight's all yours, ma'am.
Good day, everyone. I just want to say thanks to the Department of the Premier's Office for allowing us this opportunity to talk about the Volvo Ocean Race Cape Town Stopover water plan. I think I'm just going to be covering a few things today with you. Basically, it will be, the background. There's a challenge that we obviously face, then what the requirements are, what we're actually talking about. Then there's obviously a plan we put together, and then there's solutions as well. I think what's important to note is, just from continuing on from Bruce's presentation, was that there's a global campaign from the Volvo Ocean Race that was put together, and I'm more just now going to focus on how do we reduce the actual plastic, single-use plastic, or eliminate it in our race village. And basically that is what my water plan is speaking towards. Just so you understand the race village or the footprint that I'm referring to, obviously the V&A waterfront is a very large place, and as Megan also mentioned, is we don't have control over the restaurants and everywhere, but essentially our race village stretches from the Table Bay parking area where we have our team bases. We then work on Jetty 1, Jetty 2 and Key 6, which essentially normally is where fishing boats moor. It's not an event space. And then we go all the way to North Wharf, where we have the boat yard where this function was going to happen until yesterday about 4 o'clock. And then there's also where the boats are getting taken out. So that's essentially the race village area that I'm going to be talking about, and that our plan is talking towards. So the biggest thing is that the challenge that I faced is, what do you do when your city is having a huge water crisis and that they have put in severe water restrictions, but your event's key message is no single-use plastic? I mean, for me it was, I started to stress, because actually there's no handbook out there that is going to tell me you need to do it this way, or this way. So basically what I did is I divided our event into 3 different areas. Basically there we have the boats, and I tried to work out how much water is our event actually going to be using. So I took the boats. We have 7 boats in the race. Each boat uses about 1,000 liters to wash itself with. Those boats will be washed about 2 times. That's 14,000 liters. To wash the sailing gear is about 350 liters per boat. This gear will be washed about 3 times over the next few days. That's another 7,350 liters. Then we went to the pavilions. Now pavilions, which is hospitality buildings, things like that, got toilets and they've got kitchens, and estimated they use about 5,000 liters per day. This estimates over 17 days, 3 pavilions, is 255,000 liters. Team bases, where the teams are, they get connected to fresh water. That's about 2,000 liters per day over the 17 days stopover. That's 238,000 liters. Then a big thing that we have to do is, once we've packed up, because the equipment from Volvo Ocean Race is going to New Zealand and they've got very strict customs rules there, we have to actually wash the gear that needs to go into the containers. I mean, literally, you can't, if they open the container in New Zealand and there's a small spider in, they will just close it and you're not able to access that stuff. So that is another 20,000 litres. And then for fresh drinking water, I think I worked very on the lower levels. We have about 747 international and local staff on site every day for 17 days. If each of them uses 3 litres of drinking water per day, that's 236,799 litres. Then, I mean, Bruce said that we have over 1.2 million visitors currently already that has gone through, but I only worked on 220,000 visitors, each having a litre a day. That's another 220,000 litres. So in essence, we are looking at just under a million litres of water that our stopover would be using, being on the safe side of my numbers. So that is basically the amount of litres. I then thought, okay, what is the plan to try and do, because we don't have water. So my first thing is, when we talk about the boats, what the V&A Waterfront has done is they obviously have a lot of boats and they need to be washed. They've actually invested in 1,000 litre square tanks that they've put on the jetties. So we've put 4 on Key 6, we've put some in the boatyard area, we've put some in the team base area, and this water that are in these tanks are basically harvested water from the V&A Waterfront that they collect from their air cons. They've got streams underneath, so there's quite a few different ways that they're collecting water, and then they're pumping it into these tanks, and we are then using that for the boats where they wash themselves. Then the next one is the pavilions. Now, my initial discussions with Volvo was that we will only be connecting 3 pavilions to fresh water. I think that when you start on this journey, the journey that I've gone through over the last 2 months, or few months basically, is that you become very passionate about your city and the water problems we have, because it's a thing you have to deal with on a daily basis now. So I informed Volvo that they can only connect Volvo, Dongfang and the Sailors Terrace to fresh water, and I limited them to 2,000 litres per day, where we've put measures on those connections so that we can actually see. And what I've actually done then is I said to them that if they go over the 2,000 litres a day, the city will be fining them 50,000 rand. It's not true, but it's basically just my way of trying to keep people to try and minimize the water use. So what we did is we don't allow any toilets within our race village to be connected to the fresh water. So for Volvo Pavilion, I got in a JoJo tank. I connected their toilet to the JoJo tank. They get 5,000 litres a day. And basically they use their toilets through that, and they put up signage in their toilet that this is non-potable water, so people understand. The toilets that we rent in from sales hire are chemical toilets, so there's no water in that. So basically that solved our toilets problem. So we've used and then also a big thing is I've connected none of the team bases to fresh water. So every stopover they get connected to fresh water. The teams use it to wash their gear. Anything that they have in their team bases, we have not connected one. We've actually just put the 2,000 litre tanks within the area where they can then go and use the harvested water from the V&A Waterfront to clean their gear. So I think then moving on, the biggest obstacle I faced was the fresh drinking water, and what are we going to do? Because when I met with Volvo, they have their fresh water units within the race village, but we are in the biggest crisis at the moment is where we don't have water. But everybody's going to be drinking out of plastic water bottles. But what do you do if your key message from your stopover is don't use plastic bottles? But your city doesn't have water, so which one is more important? And I think from my side, both is equally as important, to try and minimize the plastic in our oceans and that we use, but also to try and find a plan to get our water usage down. It is then that I decided to create an area on Key 6 where we create messaging. These are just 2 examples. Messaging to encourage people within the race village to come to this area to drop off your plastic bottle. And then it started off with just, that's a good thing for you to do. Try and minimize your plastic. We understand you're going to be drinking out of plastic bottles, but come to the race village, drop it off, and there will be messaging around it, and then also messaging around the actual water crisis that we are having. It was then that while I was in Alicante for the race restart in October, that I had the opportunity to meet with Blue Water, which is a Swiss-based company, and they've partnered with 11th Hour Racing, who are actually a sponsor of the Vestas 11th Hour Racing team. Now we're fortunate to have the Blue Water guys here today, and I think, Aaron, for you, for example, it would be, I'm talking about the event side of it, but it would be good for you to chat to them with regards to what they can assist you with other things, because there's just the opportunities and things that they've mentioned is endless. But basically, they have their own patent second-generated reverse osmosis technology that's called superior osmosis. It's very complicated words, and I'm sure they can explain it all to you. That generates up to 6,912 liters of direct flow water from a single unit that's basically the same size as a computer tower. And basically what they've done is their filter system can basically take grey water and remove practically all known contaminants, including toxic metals, chemicals, viruses, and microorganic substances, down to an invisible 0.001 micron, which, if you think about it, a human blood cell has 5 microns across, and then the point of a needle has got 1,230 microns in it. So that just shows you actually how good that system is. And also, if you have a chat to them, they'll explain to you that they can literally take any water. And I can never remember, David told me the Poo-Poo River in some Shanghai or somewhere where they basically, the name explains the water quality, and they took it and they turned it into drinking water. So really an interesting way to go chat to them. But moving on from that is then, they mentioned in Alicante that they would like to come to South Africa and sponsor with 11th Hour Racing the Blue Water unit, so that we can provide fresh drinking water to the public. And that was absolutely amazing to me, because we can't have the water fountains and we're trying to minimize the plastic bottles. So what we've done is we allocated 4 areas within the V&A waterfront where we put in 5,000 litre JoJo tanks. It was very important that these would obviously be located in high visible area, but also that we could have access with a large truck to deliver non-potable water to it. I think the journey we went on here was quite difficult. I had a lot of feedback from people saying, no, it's not possible, we don't know the company, but I mean, this is a new thing to us in South Africa, and we have to, or in Cape Town, and we have to open our eyes to what can we do to try and make it work. So I had meetings with Marley from the V&A Waterfront Health and Safety, and then also from Sigmund from the City Department, to confirm actually now, once we get this water and goes through these units, are we going to test it to make sure that from our side as an event, we've got the record to prove that this water is actually safe for consumption? Because the last thing we want as an event is for people to drink the water and then we get bombarded on social media to say that, you know, I got sick and I drank water from there. And what we've managed to do is we're actually testing this water on a daily basis. So we've got a record, a running record of this water for the whole stopover. So every day the water gets tested and we've got the results. So if we would get any inquiry from anything, we've got the proof to back it up. And just so you know, to date we've had no problems at all, and we don't have any, all the testing came out well as well. So basically, a JoJo tank, you would think is a very ugly thing. It also creates a great branding opportunity. So what we've done is we've used it to create messaging around what we are doing, what blue water is, and what water is that they're using, and not there. And just with regards to what they're doing, and it's a great messaging opportunity. There's a sample of the blue water unit, and next to it is the JoJo tank with the branding on it, and then also the signage that we've done. But then there was a wonderful opportunity where Console Glass, and you'll each see there's a bottle on your table, wanted the opportunity to also be involved in this, and that's when we realized that they could actually take the recycling stand, and what they could do is every single person then that comes to the race village and give in their plastic bottle can get a complimentary Console Glass bottle. So we've got about 50,000 units that we're giving out over the stopover period, compliments of Console Glass. Then people take this bottle and they go fill it up at the station. So I think from that side, we covered quite good. With the sustainability side, we looked after, we're minimizing the plastic and we're also saving on water. Then the big thing is also then what we've encouraged all pavilions and things to do is none of them are making use of plastic bottles within their hospitality sites. We're actually renting out the blue, the blue bottle coolers that you see there. And most people, even the offices everywhere, has got those units, and those are reusable plastic. So we encourage people to make use of that. So I think that's just in brief what we've put together to try and find a solution for our water usage within this period. And I think it's important for people to know is that you could start from a very small place. You know, everything makes a difference. Just any little thing that you do, it makes a difference. So I just wanted to actually say that by doing all of the above, we've taken our water usage from just under 1 million to a maximum of about 102,000 litres, which obviously would be even more less because that's the maximum that pavilions are allowed to use. Thank you.